All right. Good evening, students. I hope I'm audible, online students. Now, in our previous lecture, we were talking about the economy of the post-Mauryan age, and most of the aspects we had already covered. The only one that was remaining was the monetary system. What are we going to see over here in the monetary system? Expansion of the monetary system and the incorporation of a number of new features. Write down. The monetary system of the post-Mauryan age exhibited the characteristics of expansion, innovation, and diversification. Expansion how? Because coins would start to appear in regions where they did not exist previously, such as the deep south, such as parts of the Deccan region, right? Write down. Coinage, next main point लिख सकते हो. Coinage emerged in every corner of the subcontinent. Emerged in every corner of the subcontinent. Full stop. For the first time, coins came into use in the deep south. In the deep south. Full stop. Sub point लिखो. Further, the number of coins circulated in the rural economy also increased appreciably as compared to the Mauryan age. Also increased appreciably as compared to the Mauryan age. So sectors of the economy which had not been monetized and regions of India which were not monetized became monetized from this period onwards. Next main point likho. Post-Mauryan coinage also exhibited a number of new features. Subpoint new features. Subpoint. For the first time, gold and lead coins were issued in India. Gold coinage introduced by which dynasty? Indo-Greeks. Lead coinage introduced by the Satvahans. Okay? For the first time, gold and lead coins were introduced in India. Next subpoint likho. The punch-marked coins were replaced by regular coinage bearing names, dates, images, and script. Names, dates, images, and scripts. तो stop. तो innovation भी देखने के लिए मिला. And diversification, this is also going to be visible. How? In different parts of India, different types of coins were in issue. So write down. Since, next main point. Since India exhibited a multi-state system, comma, different types of coins were issued by the rulers of different regions. Full stop. Sub point. Further, the city administrations and guilds also issued their own unique coins, thus contributing to the diversity of coinage. Next sub point. Numismatic diversity was also a reflection of the growing cultural numismatic diversity was also a reflection of the growing cultural, linguistic, and religious diversity. So each region had its own culture, language, and religion. इसमें कुछ similarities होंगी, but notable differences भी होंगे, and because of that, the images, the names, the script on the coins is going to differ. Next sub point. Technological disparity between different regions also contributed to the diverse coinage. ठीक है? So this is the picture of coinage during the post-Mauryan age. क्या elements हैं? Expansion, innovation, and diversification. Right? Take down a question. The second urbanization reached its peak during the Post-Mauryan age. Comment. Another question. Enumerate the characteristics of the expanding economy of the Post-Mauryan age. Word limit 200 for both, 15 marks. So for answering the first question, what are the economic features that we have to highlight? Features of both the rural and urban economy, or only the urban economy? Only the urban economy. Second, urbanization reached its peak. This cannot be done without referring to agricultural expansion, but agricultural expansion should not be the main focus. Over here, expansion of trade, crafts, specialization, expansion of guilds, the monetary system and proliferation of coins, that should be the main focus. Expanding trade between India and the foreign regions, so that should be the focus over here, right? Second वाले में enumerate the characteristics of the expanding economy of the post-Mauryan age. Over here, equal focus has to be given to both the rural as well as urban economy. ठीक है? That is going to be the difference between the two. तो ये हो गया है our discussion on the economy of the post-Mauryan age. Now the post-Mauryan society. What are the elements that we are going to see? Social stagnation or social change? Social change, why? Foreign invasions हो रहे हैं, expansion of agriculture, the incorporation of tribes into the economy, the Brahmanical system is going to react against this. Buddhism is going to give a counter reaction, right? This is going to result in a number of social changes. Write down. The post-Mauryan age, witnessed significant social changes which laid the foundations for the future Hindu society. Which laid the foundations of the future Hindu society. What will be the developments that take place? Firstly, the assimilation of a number of non-Aryan groups into mainstream society due to the influx of foreigners and the expansion of agriculture, resulting in the peasantization of tribes. How is the Brahmanical system going to react against it, to this intermixing of varnas? Positive reaction or negative reaction? Negative reaction. Therefore, the social rigidity seen from the Brahmanical perspective is going to increase. Rules to prevent the violation of the Varna Ashram Dharma system are going to be put in place. Rules to restrict the freedom of women are going to become stronger or weaker? Stronger, so as to prevent intermixing of Varnas. Caste is going to become a more and more important tool to regulate the society, since Varnas are going to lose their functional role in maintaining social hierarchies, right? However, is a Brahmanism the dominant religious force at this point of time? No. As a result, the normative Brahmanical texts or ideology will be challenged through the ideological pillar of Buddhism, Jainism, etc. Okay? Write down. The assimilation of next main point, the assimilation of a large number of non-Aryans including tribals and foreigners the assimilation of a large number of non-Aryans, including tribals and foreigners, into the mainstream society, would result in the intermixing of varnas and castes, Full stop. Subpoint. The Brahmin intellectuals reacted against this trend with hostility. Why? Because dilution of varna and caste threatened their supreme position within society. Since the dilution of varna and caste threatened their supreme position in society. So what are the Brahminical intellectuals going to perceive this age as a golden age or an age of crisis? Brahmins, age of crisis. So a new chronological and ideological framework was invented. क्या बोला कि कौन सा युग आ गया है? कलयुग आ गया है. Write down. Next sub point. This crisis experienced by the Brahmanical intellectuals was expressed in the framework of within the framework of Kali Yuga, This crisis experienced by the Brahmanical intellectuals was expressed within the framework of Kali Yuga. Full stop. Next point, main point. According to the Brahmanical literature of this period, revolts by the lower varnas against the upper varnas became frequent. Revolts by the lower varnas against the upper varnas became frequent. So what kind of attitude is the Brahmanical literature of this period going to have towards the lower varnas? Favorable or hostile? Hostile. In fact, Manusmriti, which is one of the most important Brahmanical compositions of this period, advises the upper varnas to stick together, to come together into a common alliance against the lower varnas and be extremely harsh in dealing with them. Subpoint likho. Therefore, the Manusmriti instructs the upper varnas to unite and deal strictly with the lower varnas. Full stop. Now, are you familiar with this term? Varna Samkar. What does it mean? The intermingling of or intermixing of the varnas. This was a process that had been going on from as early as the Mahajanpat period, right? Now, because of the assimilation of non-Aryan groups, frequency of Varna Samkar, is that going to go down or is that going to increase? that is going to increase, right? Because there are number of non-Aryans जिनका कोई वर्ना status नहीं है, कोई caste नहीं है, they are going to start marrying Aryans, and as a result intermixing of varnas is going to increase. What is going to be the result of that? The number of castes, that is also going to increase, right? Write down. Next main point, Varna Samkar within brackets, intermixing of the varnas emerged as a big concern for the Brahmins, full stop. Sub point लिखो. While the Mauryan period Buddhist texts talk about 12 types of Varna Samkaras, comma, the Manusmriti mentions 63 different types. What does this indicate? That Varna Samkaras had become much more frequent as compared to the Mauryan period. Sub point likho, next sub point. This indicates the growing frequency of Varna Samkaras. During the Post-Mauryan Age. And what kind of an effect is it going to have on the relations between the Brahmin and non-Brahminical sections of society? Is it going to contribute to greater social harmony or social tension? Why? Because Brahmins are never going to be in favor of increasing Varna Samkaras, since it threatens their position within society. Clear? Next main point likho. Owing to the rising trend of Varna Samkar, owing to the rising trend of Varna Samkar, comma, social tension between Brahmins and non-Brahmins increased, resulting in a strong Brahmanical reaction. ठीक है? So how is this strong Brahmanical reaction going to manifest itself? जो normative texts हैं इस period के, they are going to start saying things such as, for example, Manusmriti is going to say that a 10-year-old Brahmin is superior to a 100-year-old Kshatriya. So is there any possibility of marriage between the two Varnas? It has disregarded it. Further, it also says that all types of intervarna and adharmaya marriages are illegal, right? And compare it to what the Arthashastra had said, they should be considered legal. Further, another major threat to the supremacy of Brahmins within society was the influx of foreign rulers. Initially, these foreign rulers did not follow Brahmanism. Therefore, what would be the initial reaction of the Manuskriti towards them? Would it be favorable or hostile? Hostile. It condemns them as impure or malech. Okay? When some foreign ruling groups expressed interest in becoming part of the Varna hierarchy so that they could claim Kshatriya status, this gave an opportunity for the Brahmanical section to capitalize upon the opportunities presented by this new development. Therefore, their attitude is also going to change. Now, while they are going to admit these foreigners into the Varnashram Dharma system, they would be never given the status of Brahmin. They would only be given the status of Kshatriya, and not ordinary Kshatriyas but fallen Kshatriyas or Patit Kshatriyas. Okay? So Shakas, for example, were given the status of Patit Kshatriyas or fallen Kshatriyas or Vratya Kshatriyas. Clear? Write down. ब्राह्मणिकल रिएक्शन है ना, उसी में सब पॉइंट लिखो. मनुस्मृति, the Manusmriti categorically states that a 10-year-old Brahmin is superior to a 100-year-old Kshatriya. Next point. Further, he also outlaws all types of Varna exogamy and adharmaya marriages. Next up point. Manu expresses extreme hostility towards foreigners in the beginning. Expresses extreme hostility towards foreigners in the beginning, calling them malech, meaning impure. Malech, within brackets you can write impure. So stop. Later, he gives them a space in the Varna hierarchy as second class Kshatriyas. Is the attitude of the Manusmriti towards Shudras going to be the same as the attitude of the Arthashastra towards them? Arthashastra ने क्या बोला था? They should be considered to be Aryans and not fit for enslavement, not enslaved. यहाँ पे मनुस्मृति क्या बोलेगा? Would he give them the Aryan status? No, he would condemn them as non-Aryans and impure. He would also say that they should not be given the right to cultivate land. Rather, they should be confined only to the manufacturing sector, crafts production sector. ठीक है? Write down. Next sub point. Manu's attitude towards the Shudras was also different from the Arthashastra. Full stop. He denies them the right to cultivate land or raise cattle full stop. Instead he confines them only to crafts production. And why do you think he wanted to do this? दो फैक्टर्स, एक सोशल और एक इकोनॉमिक. इकोनॉमिक फैक्टर क्या? That this was a period of expanding production. Right? So, because of growing internal as well as external trade, demand for manufactured goods was increasing, and sufficient number of craftsmen were needed in the cities to manufacture the goods that were in demand. In order to fulfill this demand for labor, Manusmriti said that the Shudras should not be permitted to practice agriculture. ठीक है? एक और इकोनॉमिक फैक्टर क्या? That who should have ownership of the agricultural surplus? Should the Shudras be allowed to appropriate the surplus, or should the entire surplus be in the hands of the upper Varnas only? Upper Varnas only. Best way to do that? To prevent Shudras from practicing agriculture. Social factor क्या? To uphold the Varnashram Dharma system, according to which each of the Varnas has a prescribed role within society. Brahmins are supposed to provide the functions of priests and teachers. Kshatriyas are expected to be warriors and rulers. Vaishyas are supposed to be involved in economic activities such as agriculture, animal husbandry, and trade, whereas manual labor along with crafts production is to be performed by Shudras. ठीक है? Now, if Vaishyas or Kshatriyas or Brahmins were to be permitted to practice crafts production, what would happen to the Varnashram Dharma system? It would be diluted, thus challenging the supreme position of Brahmins within the society. So another priority was to uphold the ruled-based occupational division in accordance with the Varnashram Dharma system. Clear hai? So what is the last thing that you have written? From the Arthashastra. हाँ, raise cattle. हाँ, आगे लिखो. Instead confines in only to crafts production. Write down. हाँ, या next सब point लिख सकते हो. On one hand, Manu recognized the need to increase the number of groups involved in crafts production. Increase the number of groups involved in crafts production. Full stop. On the other hand, he wanted the upper varnas to be in complete control of the surplus. Additionally, he wanted to uphold the Varna-based occupational division to preserve the supreme position of Brahmins. The supreme position of Brahmins in society. ठीक है? And the attitude of the Manusmriti towards women is also going to be shaped by the concern to maintain purity of varnas. ठीक है? Write down. Next main point लिख सकते हो. The Brahmanical attitude towards women was also shaped by the concern to maintain the purity of the Varna system. To maintain the purity of the Varna system. By the concern to maintain the purity of the Varna system. Full stop. As such, सब पॉइंट करके लिख सकते हो. Varna exogamy was strictly prohibited. Next sub point. Women were denied the right to education. Next sub point. They were not allowed to own or inherit property. Except for Stridhan. And how was Stridhan defined? As the wealth that a woman brings to her husband's house in the form of a gift given to her by her parents at the time of marriage. Okay, so some clothes, some jewelry, some money, cash, etc. That only would be Stridhan. Clear? Next point. Pre-puberty marriages were prescribed. Next sub point, widow remarriages were prohibited. तो स्टॉप. नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो. ये समझ में आना ये सब क्यों किया है? Why would pre-puberty marriages be encouraged? So that women may not be able to engage in sexual congress with certain undesirable elements who do not belong to the same varna as them or the same caste as them before they get married, right? So the offspring would have the same varna as the mother as well as father. These kinds of things would be there. Okay, just give me a second, I'll be right back. All right, now क्या देखा हमने? That attitude towards women, towards the shudras, etc., all were changing. Primary concern क्या था? To protect the purity of varnas because of the rising practice of varna samkara, right? तो उसके लिए क्या बोला कि कौन सा एज आ गया है? कलयुग आ गया है, and therefore the upper varnas need to unite and Brahmins need to lead them by increasing social rigidity in order to preserve the purity of the varnas. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो. However, it must be kept in mind that the Manusmriti was not the only authoritative work on social norms during this period. Full stop. Buddhism and Jainism was not the only authoritative work on the social norms of this period. ठीक है, so it was one of many. The whole sole responsibility of regulating the society was not with Manu or in the Manusmriti. Different regions or different rulers followed different legal codes. They selected or handpicked some elements from each of these different codes. So some elements from Manusmriti would be incorporated into the legal code, some elements from Buddhist literature, from Buddhist jurisprudence, some from Jain jurisprudence, etc. ठीक है, write down. Buddhist and Jain literature or Buddhism and Jainism, same point में ही, Buddhism and Jainism were equally, if not more popular than the Brahmanical religion. Full stop. सब पॉइंट लिखो. Therefore, it cannot be stated with certainty. Comma, to what degree were the laws prescribed in the Manusmriti being followed in society? Have to give me a couple of minutes, right? Sorry about that once again. So what had we seen? That Manusmriti was not the only normative text which was the source of law at this period, and we are uncertain to what degree the prescriptions of Manu were actually being observed in society. ठीक है. However, one trend that we can see is कि Brahmanical reaction आ रहा है, and why is that? Because of the influx of a large number of non-Aryans within society, namely both foreigners as well as tribals. ठीक. Now one major theme in the history of this period is the impact of internal and external trade on culture and society. We need to explore this as well. What was the cultural and social impact of expanding trade during the post-Mauryan period? Give the heading. Cultural and social impact of expanding trade during the post-Mauryan age. Cultural and social impact of the expanding trade during the post-Mauryan age. Of the expanding trade during the post-Mauryan age. First, let us address culture. इसमें अलग अलग facets आ जाएंगे. For example, religion, art, architecture, or even literature, language, etc. Right? In the field of religion, what do we see? The emergence of bhakti in all the popular religions. For example, in Buddhism, we see the emergence of Mahayana Buddhism. In which the Buddha was promoted from the position of a great teacher to the supreme deity. Idol worship of the Buddha began. Avdan literature was composed. Right? In Jainism, among the Digambar Jains, the Murti Pujak sect emerged, which began worshipping the idols of the previous Tirthankaras. In Hinduism, we see the emergence of Vaishnavism, Shaivism, as well as Shaktiism. Okay. What is the association of trade with bhakti? बताइए. Because of trade, ideas are going to be exchanged much more rapidly over long distances. Cultural assimilation is going to take place. Idol worship, for example, was already popular among many of the foreigners and tribals that were now being incorporated into the mainstream society. Therefore, through the link of trade, these ideals as well as practices were incorporated into the Vedic religion, into the Brahmanical religion. That is one link. Secondly, bhakti by nature कैसा होता है? Is it conservative or reformative? No, it is more reformative in nature, right? It represents a note of protest against priestly domination and excessive ritualization of religion, right? And it seeks to establish a direct link between the devotee and the god, thus bypassing the priest. तो need of priests उसको reject करता है, need of the priestly class को. Now, which increasingly affluent class do you think would be interested in reducing the influence of priests within society? Traders, right? They may come from different backgrounds. Some of them may be Buddhist also, some Vaishyas also, some Kshatriyas also, and some even Brahmins, right? Now, traders want to limit the influence that the priestly class has in society, right? And how are they going to do that? They are going to promote the alternative ideologies to Brahmanism. And what are those alternative ideologies? These. Okay? So the trading communities is all going to undertake patronage of the Buddhist Sangha, of the Jain monks, Murti Pujaks especially, and they are going to contribute heavily to the construction of temples of these gods and goddesses. They are also going to patronize scholars who write literature revolving around the legends of these gods and goddesses. Okay? These kinds of things are going to take place. Another way in which trade resulted in the emergence of bhakti क्या है? कैसे? How else is trade going to be linked with the emergence of bhakti? A number of these rulers were of foreign origin. क्या चाहते थे ये? They wanted acceptance within society. They wanted to convince the people of India that they are not distinct, rather they are the same. One of the elements of bhakti was the idea of avatarvad, that supreme god has several incarnations and reincarnations, and this provided a convenient meeting point for foreign or tribal culture with the mainstream culture, right? So Aryan gods and goddesses were given the status of supreme gods, and the tribal representations or tribal deities were given the status of their incarnations and reincarnations. Thus a composite and continuous religious and social whole was created. So there was a level of wholesomeness in the society as a result of this. Okay? This is what happened. So write down. The expanding trade of the post-Mauryan age had a profound impact on contemporary society, and culture, on contemporary society and culture. Full stop. Next point. Within culture, one of its most significant manifestations was the emergence of bhakti. Full stop. Next point likho. Trade emerged as the link between the mainstream culture, and the tribal and foreign cultures, resulting in the exchange of ideas and practices such as idol worship, reincarnation theory, and construction of temples or shrines. Full stop. Next point. Bhakti affected every prominent Indian religion. The point. In Buddhism, it resulted in the emergence of Mahayana Buddhism. Next point. In Jainism, it is reflected in the form of the Murti Pujak sect among Digambars. Next point. In Brahmanism, it manifested in the form of Vaishnavism, Shaivism, and the Shakti cult. Vaishnavism, Shaivism, and the Shakti cult. Next point, main point. The core ideas of bhakti, namely idol worship, comma, theory of reincarnation, comma, establishing a personal relationship between God and the devotee, and the rejection of priestly rituals were never part of the indigenous Aryan tradition. Okay? So bhakti essentially, is it an Indian concept, indigenously Indian concept, or a foreign or tribal concept? Foreign and tribal concept. Next सब point लिखो इसके अंदर. These were added to the Indian religion due to growing trade contact with foreign and tribal cultures. Example, the earliest pictorial representations of Vishnu do not appear in India. कहां पे appear होते हैं ये? In Afghanistan, a place called Al Khanoum. This is in northern Afghanistan, and they are found on the coins of an Indo-Greek ruler known as Agathocles. Agathocles. ठीक है, write down the earliest pictorial representations. Sub point, the earliest pictorial representations of Vishnu appear from Al-Khanum in North Afghanistan. On the coins of the Indo-Greek ruler Agathocles. 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 And it is from there that the cult of Vaishnavism or pictorial representations of Vishnu traveled to India. इंडिया में अर्लीस्ट वैष्णवाइट श्राइन्स कहाँ से मिली हैं? एट अ प्लेस कॉल्ड नगरी इन पंजाब. ठीक है, तो वहां से इट वाज द इंडो ग्रीक्स हु ब्रॉट दिस ट्रेडिशन टू इंडिया. नेक्स्ट सब पॉइंट लिखो. Similarly, it is initially from the Kushan coins, within brackets 1st century AD, that we first start finding Shiva images in the anthropomorphic form and the Nandi form. ठीक है. So once again, in India or outside India? Outside India. ठीक है. It is from there that the Shaivite cult, especially the pictorial representations of Shiva, were popularized. Next sub point. ये भी वही क्या बोलते हैं अफगानिस्तान वाले रीजन में. So it was Vima Cadphises and Vima Tacto who had issued these coins. Next sub point लिखो. Foreign influence can also be seen on the Shakti cult. Full stop. On the Shakti cult. For example, there was a Persian goddess called Nana. How is she shown? She is shown riding a lion. And she is shown as the slayer of a bull-like demon. In India, do you have such a similar goddess or not? कौन? Durga or Mahishasur-Mardini, etc. ठीक है, write down. The Persian goddess Nana rode a lion and killed a demon who was part man, part bull. She is considered, full stop, she is considered to be the inspiration behind the Hindu goddess Durga. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट सब पॉइंट लिखो. वंस अगेन शक्ति कल्ट का ही. बुद्धिस्ट लिटरेचर as well as Kushan coins refers to a goddess called Harati, who is shown simultaneously to be a goddess who both eats children as well as protects them. ठीक है, so at the same time she is extremely cruel and also extremely benevolent. So she represents the Hindu, or she resembles the Hindu goddess Kali, right? So once again, Harati may have been introduced in Buddhist literature due to the Kushan connection, and Kushans were on the crossroads between different civilizations. पर्शिया से कुछ ले रहे थे, ग्रीस से कुछ ले रहे थे, चाइनीज से कुछ ले रहे थे और इंडियन से कुछ ले रहे थे. Possibly it is also based on one of the Persian or Chinese legends. Write down. Similarly, क्या लिखा है आपने यहाँ पे अभी? Kushan coins refer to a goddess Harati who is simultaneously depicted as the devourer as well as protector of children. Protector of children. Full stop. She may be the inspiration behind the goddess Kali. Behind the goddess Kali. Full stop. Next sub point or next main point लिखो. This period also witnessed the emergence of the cult of a warrior god called Skand. Another name, Kartikeya, the elder son of Lord Shiva and goddess Parvati, right? The emergence of the cult of a warrior god called Skand or Kartikeya. How is he depicted? With weapons in both hands and a peacock perched on his shoulder, right? So his mythological vehicle is in fact the peacock. Is there any similar god in South India? Kon? Murugan, right? So Murugan is supposed to be an incarnation of none other than Kartikeya. And how did the cult of Kartikeya reach the deep south, do you think? Through the trade routes. It was through the trade routes that the Shaivite cult also reached South India, along with the cult of Kartikeya, who was given a local representation in the form of Murugan. Write down. He is depicted bearing arms with a peacock. With a peacock. Full stop. His cult did not remain confined. His cult did not remain confined to North India alone. To North India alone. Full stop. In South India, Murugan began being worshipped as an incarnation. Began being worshipped as an incarnation of Kartikeya. Full stop. Subpoint. Thus, trade must definitely have played an important role in cultural diffusion and assimilation. Full stop. ठीक है? So this is one of the cultural impacts of expanding trade. Another impact of expanding trade on culture came in the field of sculpture. कैसे? What was the nature of the sculpture that was produced during this period? Primarily religious or primarily secular? Primarily religious sculpture in the form of idols or images of gods and goddesses meant to be worshipped, right? Now, where do you think this custom first began? In India or outside India? Outside India, in the region of Afghanistan. Who were ruling Afghanistan during this period initially? The Indo-Greeks. So they had incorporated or introduced this culture. So they laid the foundations of the Gandhar school of sculptural art around the 1st century BCE. ठीक है? Then the region of Afghanistan and northern India came under the control of a single power with the emergence of which empire? The Kushan Empire, right? So, like the Gandhar school of art, the Kushans laid the foundations of another school of sculptural art in North India. This was the Mathura school in the 1st century CE. ठीक है? Then this was also the period when a trade and connectivity between North and South India was also increasing, as a result of which Buddhism, specifically Mahayana Buddhism, started to gain popularity in the Deccan region in the Satavahan Empire, and they began patronizing a native school of sculptural art known as the Amravati school from the 1st century CE onwards as well. Clear? Write down. The impact of trade can also be seen on sculptural art. Full stop. The Gandhar, Mathura and Amravati schools, emerged primarily as schools of religious sculpture. Schools of religious sculpture. And as the subcontinent became deeply interconnected, comma, regional sculpture began to proliferate due to the interchange of ideas. ठीक है? Then from religious culture, the sculptural art also evolved into secular sculpture, especially royal sculpture. And this is one thing that was unique to the Mathura school of sculpture. And why do you think it was so? Because Kushans had an already existing tradition of inscribing the names of the rulers on coins, of stamping their images on the coins, etc. And now the same pictorial representation of the royal figures in the form of sculpture is also going to be promoted. Write down. Next point. Later on, comma, non-religious royal portraits also began emerging under the Kushans at Mathura. ठीक है? And apart from this, we also find the influence of trade on architecture. कैसे? A large number of caves, temples and shrines would start emerging from this period onwards. And what do you think was facilitating this? First of all, for this, large amount of funds were needed. And वो कहाँ से आएंगे? Trade से आएंगे. Secondly, trade was also resulting in the exchange of ideological and cultural transmission. This we have already seen. It resulted in the emergence of bhakti and idol worship. ठीक है? Idol worship में idols बनाए जाएंगे, and where would they be kept? In these caves, temples and shrines, right? Further, trade was also resulting in the emergence of a strong class of merchants. And who would this merchant class give its patronage to? To the Brahmanical priests, to the orthodox elements, or the heterodox elements such as Mahayana Buddhism or Vaishnavism or Shaivism, etc. heterodox element जो reformative elements हैं within society, and they also contributed to the construction of temples and caves. Clear? Write down. A large number of caves, temples and shrines were patronized by rulers as well as trade guilds. Full stop. Sub point. Trade played an important role in the emergence of these art forms. Sub point लिखो. It generated the necessary wealth. To fund such monuments. Next sub point. It contributed to the emergence of bhakti and idol worship. Through cultural contact and assimilation. Next sub point. It also facilitated the emergence of an affluent merchant class that actively promoted an affluent merchant. It also resulted in the emergence of an affluent merchant class that actively promoted all available alternatives to the orthodox Brahmanical religion, which was harmful towards its economic interests. How was Brahmanism antithetical to the economic interests of the traders? It avoided usury. It insisted upon caste-based occupational strictness. It prohibited or it discouraged interaction between the different varnas, especially between Aryans and non-Aryans. So foreigners, say tribals, say contact would be discouraged. These were the things that it was doing. Therefore, the affluent trading classes realized that if Brahmanism was allowed to make a comeback, then their economic interests are going to be hurt. Therefore, they were ready to promote all the alternatives. One way to do that was to fund the construction of caves and temples. तो ये हो गया the cultural impact. क्या क्या देखा हमने? Emergence of bhakti. We have also seen the emergence of sculpture and architecture. ठीक? Next, influence of the expanding economy on the society. लिखो. Because of growing trade, comma, the Aryan society was exposed to non-Aryan groups and ideas. Full stop. Next point. A sub point लिखो. What kind of a reaction would this elicit from the Brahminical intellectuals? Favorable or negative reaction? Negative reaction. They would perceive this growing interconnectedness of Aryans with non-Aryans as a threat, and they would frame this period in terms of a social crisis, that is Kali Yuga. Write down. This was perceived as a threat. By the Brahmanical orthodoxy, which described this period as Kali Yuga. Full stop. Next up point. In response, the Brahmanical society became even more rigid and immobile as compared to earlier. ठीक है. Next main point लिखो. However, expanding trade also enriched the trader class, who felt threatened by rising rigidity within the Brahmanical order. Full stop. Sub point. They did not want the rigid caste system to restrict the supply of workers and craftsmen. Full stop. Next sub point. Thus they supported those ideologies which were opposed to Brahmanism, such as Mahayana Buddhism and Hindu Bhakti. नहीं, कोई प्रॉपर नाम नहीं था हिंदू भक्ति जैसे. हम डिफाइन कर दे रहे हैं, इंस्टेड ऑफ राइटिंग वैष्णविज्म, शैविज्म, शक्ति कल्ट, वी आर सिंपली सेइंग हिंदू भक्ति. ठीक है, तो ये था इम्पैक्ट ऑफ एक्सपैंडिंग ट्रेड ड्यूरिंग द पोस्ट मॉडर्न एज ऑन द कंटेम्प्रेरी रिलीजन एंड कंटेम्प्रेरी कल्चर एंड सोसाइटी. क्या क्या देखा है हमने? इट रिजल्टेड इन द इमर्जेंस ऑफ Bhakti movement. It also shaped the cultural trends in the art forms such as sculptural art or architecture. In society, it on the one hand resulted in the rigidification of the Brahmanical social order. On the other hand, it produced a counter reaction to the rigidification of the society due to the growing popularity by promoting the popularity of Mahayan Buddhism as well as Vaishnavism, Shaivism, Shaktism, etc. ठीक है. नाउ तो ये हो गया है आवर डिस्कशन ऑन सोसाइटी ऑफ द पोस्ट मॉडर्न एज. नेक्स्ट वी नीड टू टॉक अबाउट religion, culture and literature during the post-modern age. Let it come back. What was the biggest change religion में? Bhakti, emergence of Bhakti was the biggest change. Factors क्या थे इसके पीछे? Rising contact with foreign as well as tribal groups. Their religion already had elements of bhakti such as idol worship or worship of supreme deity, or the idea that priests are not very important when it comes to religious practice. There needs to be a direct relationship between man and God. The idea of constructing shrines, etc., वो सब already उनमें था. So these were incorporated or assimilated within the Indian society or Aryan religion as a result of growing foreign contact as well as growing contact with the tribals. So religion, culture and literature of the post-modern age. First of all, right, the biggest change was the emergence of bhakti. Why? क्यों? First of all, the expansion of agriculture was resulting in the peasantization of tribes and the mainstreaming of tribal culture, one of whose elements was idol worship. Secondly, the influx of a large number of foreigners in North India who already followed the cult of image worship, idol worship, right? And further, the patronage by foreign rulers as well, or by the ruling class. Both foreign rulers as well as indigenous rulers. Why do you think foreign rulers would promote bhakti? Not only legitimacy, but it would allow them to establish cultural linkages with the Indian people by claiming that their gods and goddesses are nothing but the reincarnations, avatars of Indian gods and goddesses. Why would the indigenous rulers such as the Satvahans or the Sangam rulers or the rulers of Kalinga, Shungas, etc., why would they promote bhakti? Because they also wanted to establish cultural linkage or culturally assimilate certain non-Aryan groups. Con the tribals who were entering mainstream society due to the expansion of agriculture. Okay? So write down. The biggest change of this period was the emergence of bhakti due to the following factors. Due to the following factors. लिखो. The expansion of agriculture through the clearing of forests was resulting in the peasantization of tribes. The expansion of agriculture through the clearing of forests was resulting in the peasantization of tribes. Full stop. Next sub point. Bhakti provided a cultural link between Aryan and tribal culture. Due to the common elements of idol worship and shrine building. Stop. Next sub point. Tribal gods were assimilated into the Brahmanical religion through the concept of reincarnations. Next point likho. So one, we have addressed expansion of agriculture. Next, influx of foreigners. Write down. The influx of a large number of foreigners also contributed to the emergence of bhakti. Full stop. Idol worship was already popular in foreign cultures. And was promoted by foreign rulers as it allowed them to integrate with the native culture. To integrate with the native culture. Full stop. Next subpoint. Sorry, next point. The emergence of bhakti was also facilitated by the patronage of the ruling class. Patronage of the ruling class. Full stop. Subpoint लिखो. Foreign rulers were seeking to establish cultural links with Indians, whereas Indian rulers sought to establish cultural links with which group? With the tribals. Okay. One thing we see is the emergence of bhakti. Does this mean that Brahmanism was completely on the decline? No. In fact, this was a period where Brahmanism was becoming stronger and stronger. Write down. This age also marked the onset of Brahmanical revival. Onset of means beginning of Brahmanical revival. Onset of Brahmanical revival. For example, in the deep south, we see the emergence of Brahmanical culture for the first time with the division of the society on the basis of Varna. How many Varnas emerged? Not 4 Varnas, 2 Varnas, Brahmins and non-Brahmins. Okay. Further, among non-Aryan origin Indian rulers such as the Satavahanas as well as the Aryan Indian rulers such as the Shungas, what do we see? Emergence of rulers having which Varna? Brahmin. Both were Brahmin. Right? Their rulers are also going to uphold the Brahmanical social order. They would insist upon the supremacy of the Brahmins. Now, it is uncertain whether the Satavahanas had any Aryan origin or not. Likely, they did not have any Aryan origin. But because the Brahmanical social order had become deeply entrenched in the Deccan region during the Mauryan age itself, that means before the period of the Satavahanas, there was no other way for the Satavahanas to assert their legitimacy except by claiming Brahmanical status. Okay. The rulers of the Satavahanas as well as the Sungas also performed Vedic sacrifices such as the Ashwamedh sacrifice or Vajpayee sacrifice, etc. So does this represent Brahmanical revival or not? Yes. Then even the foreign rulers such as the Shakas were seeking entry into the Varna system. Initially they were being denied by Manusmriti, but later Smritis allowed them entry through the performance of special Vedic rituals or special Brahmanical rituals such as the Vratyastoma sacrifice, Vratyastoma Yagya, through which the Shakas or other foreign ruling groups were given the status of Vratya Kshatriyas. Okay? Then we also find the emergence of Puranic and Smriti literature during this period. Smriti literature, what was this? These were the ancient Indian law books written from the Brahmanical perspective. Are they going to give pro-Brahmanical rules or anti-Brahmanical rules? Pro-Brahmanical rules, which would be highly discriminatory towards the other Varnas and women, right? Puranic literature was a tool to maintain distinction between the Brahmins and the non-Brahmins or people of the lower Varnas and women. How? Brahmins are going to be non-Brahmins, Vaishyas and Shudras along with women are going to be prohibited from reading the Vedas or hearing the Vedas. So how to keep them ideologically enslaved? By giving them an alternative source of value education, that is Puranic literature. Okay? So all these things reflect what? Rising dominance of Brahmins within society. Ritualism was also rising. Then temple cult and even bhakti, which initially had been reformative, was now hijacked by the priestly class. How? On the basis of Varna, Ashram, and Dharma, they could restrict entry into temples. They could also regulate the way in which religious worship is to be performed. So what are they going to insist upon? Singing of colloquial songs in the local languages? No. Dancing to God, to appease God? No. They are going to insist upon the performance of specific rituals with the correct pronunciation of very difficult to pronounce Sanskrit words or Sanskrit mantras. इस तरह से they are going to make religion more and more ritualized once again also. ठीक है? Further, they are going to insist upon things such as Kali Yuga, and on the basis of that, they are going to outlaw the adharmaya marriages or the Varna endogamous, exogamous marriages. They are also going to insist that Shudras are non-Aryans. Caste rules are going to become rigidified. Caste proliferation is going to increase as well. The emergence of untouchability is also going to take place during this period. So, for example, from this point onwards, we start to find mention of groups known as Antyaj castes. So Al-Biruni, who would write in the 11th century AD, would mention the presence of 8 Antyaj castes, 4 Varnas and 8 Antyaj castes. Manusmriti is also going to mention the presence of Chandalas, right? What does all this tell us? Rising rigidity, discrimination, as well as regressive nature of the society. So all elements of Brahmanical revival. Write down. What is the last thing that you have written? Brahmanical religion. In the form of subpoints, you can continue writing. In the deep south, comma, the Varna system was introduced, leading to a twofold Varna division of society. Full stop. Subpoint. Next subpoint. टू-फोल्ड वर्ना डिवीजन ऑफ सोसाइटी. कौन कौन से ग्रुप्स? ब्राह्मण्स एंड नॉन ब्राह्मण्स. नेक्स्ट लिखो. इंडियन रूलर्स. इंडियन रूलर्स. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट. तो पहला देख लिया ना आपने, डीप साउथ में इंडियन रूलर्स सच एज द शुंगास एंड सातवाहनास heavily patronized Brahmanism, heavily patronized Brahmanism, and even claimed Brahmin status. Stop. Sub point. Example. Example. Both Gautami Putra Satkarni and Pushyamitra Sunga. Both Gautami Putra Satkarni and Pushyamitra Sunga performed which yagya? Ashwamedh yagya. Performed the Ashwamedh yagya. Next sub point likho. Number 3. The Shakas were incorporated into the Varna system with the performance of Brahmanical sacrifices such as the Vratyastoma sacrifice. Next sub point likho. Such as the Vratyastoma sacrifice. Next sub point. Number 4. Brahmins were also the largest recipients of land grants. Did these grants give them only ownership rights or other special privileges? Other special privileges as well, such as administrative and judicial power over the people who were living on that land, etc. These kinds of things. Next sub point likho. Number 5. Smriti and Puran literature also emerged during this period. Sub point. They indicate the growing conservatism of society as well as its increasingly hierarchical nature. Right? So while the lower varnas and women were not allowed any access to the Vedas, they were being given Brahmanical indoctrination through the Purans. Okay? So this allowed the Brahmins to maintain supreme position within society. तो देखो, दो चीजें देखी हैं हमने. On the one hand, we are seeing the emergence of bhakti, which has a strong anti-Brahmanical trends. On the other hand, we see the revival of Brahmanism also taking place, or at least the beginning of the revival of Brahmanism. At the same time, another trend within religion was the growing popularity of heterodox sects such as Buddhism and Jainism also. Okay? Next point लिखो. The growing popularity of heterodox sects especially Mahayana Buddhism was another characteristic of this age. Why was it growing? देखो, this was because Buddhism was no longer confined only to the Ganga Valley or North India. It had already spread to northwestern India and its periphery, including Afghanistan, the Deccan region, as well as the deep south, due to the activities of the Buddhist missionaries during the Mauryan period. Okay? And although Mauryans collapsed, or even though the Mauryan Empire collapsed, their collapse did not affect the spread or popularity of Buddhism. Instead, the task of spreading Buddhism was now overtaken by other rulers. Okay? Buddhism was actively supported by the foreign rulers, Satavahanas, and the Sangam rulers as well. Why? Who was the biggest threat to them? Were they Aryan or non-Aryan? Non-Aryan थे. And the biggest challenge to them was the Brahmanical orthodoxy. They were threatened by Brahmanical orthodoxy. So would they not like to strengthen those movements or sects which challenged or which were anti-Brahmanical? Yes, they would. And that is why they gave their support to Buddhism. Okay? Further, What was the attitude of Brahmanism to non-Aryans? It was extremely hostile. They were condemned as being impure, and Manusmriti, for example, calls the foreigners as Malechas. Okay? And as a result, these foreign ruling groups realized that they would never be given admittance into the Indian mainstream within the confines of only Brahmanism. That is why they use their promotion of Buddhism as a bargaining chip to compel Brahmanism to change its attitude towards them. ठीक है? And कैसे होगा ये? Both pressure as well as cooperation, carrot as well as stick. What was the stick? That okay, you don't want to support us, we are going to support Buddhism, you are going to be wiped out. Foreign rulers or tribal rulers ने ये बोला. What is going to be the carrot? If you support us, provide us legitimacy, and recognize us as legitimate rulers, either as Brahmins or as Kshatriyas, we are going to give you land grants and a lot of privilege. Okay? So the attitude of Brahmins towards non-Aryans, that had to be changed, and promotion of Mahayana Buddhism was used as a bargaining chip towards it. Then economic factors हम already देख चुके हैं. क्या? This was a period of expanding trade. Traders were increasing in affluence, were increasing in prosperity. And what did they want? Did they want an open society or a closed and rigid society? Open society. Therefore, they are going to promote Mahayana Buddhism, since it did not accept the caste and varna rules being put forward by the Brahmins. ठीक है? Write down. क्या लिखा है आपने अभी? Another characteristic of this age. Write down. सब पॉइंट करके लिख सकते हो. Buddhism was no longer confined to the Ganga Valley. To the Ganga Valley. It had already spread to all parts of the subcontinent. To all parts of the subcontinent. All parts of the subcontinent. And even beyond. And even beyond. Thus, the collapse of the Mauryas did not have any major detrimental impact. Any major detrimental impact on the popularity of Buddhism. On the popularity of Buddhism. Next main point likho. In fact, Buddhism found enthusiastic supporters among the new rulers, such as the foreign rulers, Satavahanas, and Sangam kings. Full stop. Sub point. Unlike Brahmanism, unlike Brahmanism, which viewed non-Aryans as impure outsiders. Non-Aryans as impure outsiders. And was reluctant to provide legitimacy to them, comma, Buddhism had no such scruples against them. SCRUPLES, scruples against them. Full stop. Effectively, same point nahi. Effectively, these rulers found that they could be more readily accepted in Indian society, within the framework of Buddhism. Next main point. Royal patronage to Buddhism was also meant to soften the attitude of Brahmanism towards non-Aryans as part of a carrot and stick approach. As part of a carrot and stick approach. Next point लिखो. ये समझ में आया ना? Next main point लिखो. Finally, comma, the affluent merchant class also supported Mahayana Buddhism since it felt threatened by the rigid social code prescribed by Brahmanism. ठीक है? Now, what is going to be the impact of the growing popularity of heterodox sects, especially Buddhism? Is it going to create any response from the Brahmins? Yes. What kind of response? Two-sided response, right? One, hostility is going to increase. They are going to feel threat, tension, etc. So Kalyug, etc. That is going to happen. And second, they are also going to be forced to start reforming themselves. So it was due to the emergence of Mahayana Buddhism that finally some of the Brahmin intellectuals realized the need to reform the Brahminical religion and Brahminical social order. कैसे? by diluting the social hierarchy? No, that was not their purpose. Rather, by providing more more religious freedoms, right? So they would say that bhakti, rather than priestly rituals, should be the main way to practice religion, or it should be one of the legitimate ways to practice religion. क्या होगा इससे? Ordinary people, whether people from the upper varnas or the lower varnas, whether rich or poor, they would be able to establish a direct link between man and God. And in this scenario, would they be more likely or less likely to leave Brahmanism? Less likely, right? So, ab kyunki they are able to satisfy their religious urges, the pull of Buddhism is going to reduce. Okay, write down. हाँ, लिखो. The growing popularity of Mahayana Buddhism had far-reaching impacts. Full stop. Sub point 1, 2, 3, 4 करके लिखो. Number 1, impacts had a far-reaching impact. Number 1, it elicited a major reaction from Brahmanism which took the shape of A and B. A, growing rigidity on one hand, and B, an attempt to reform the religion through bhakti. Clear? Is this clear? Now, the growing popularity of Buddhism did not remain confined to India only. It also spread to other parts of the world, such as the immediate vicinity of India, Persia, Central Asia, Afghanistan, China, Southeast Asia, and Indonesia, etc. यहाँ पे भी पहुंच जाएगा. What is going to be the result of this? Buddhism became the single most important cultural export of India, and it became the basis for sustained contact between all these regions and India. Buddhist scholars, pilgrims all continued to visit India. Trade links were established as a result. Diplomatic connectivity or diplomatic relations were maintained by the rulers because of cultural similarities. Write down. Buddhism, next main point, or sorry, number 2, sub point number 2. Buddhism emerged as the main medium for cultural contact full stop. Sub point, it emerged as India's single largest cultural export. India's single largest cultural export. Full stop. Next sub point, over time it spread to Central Asia, China, Southeast Asia, Korea, and Japan. Full stop. This resulted in, next point, this resulted in sustained contact between India and these regions. Sustained contact between India and these regions. Resulting in sustained contact between India and these regions, resulting in expanding trade, cultural exchange, and diplomatic and military contact. Diplomatic and political contact. Diplomatic and political contact. Okay? So this was the impact of the growing popularity of heterodox sects, especially Mahayana Buddhism. क्या क्या देखा है हमने? Because of this, Brahmanism also elicited a strong reaction, both negative as well as positive, and a permanent basis for India's external contacts was established. This continued to remain in place till the early medieval age, till the establishment of Islamic rule over North India. Clear है? So ये देख लिया है हमने religion. बचता क्या है? Literature and culture, that we are going to discuss in tomorrow's lecture. Doubts? No? Chale then, thank you and I'll see you tomorrow.